having an enlightening discussion with scientist and best-selling author Greg Braden of the USA. When he first began studying human origins, Mr. Braden wondered whether humankind was just a genetic coincidence or was intentionally engineered. Let's now find out how his research took shape.
I don't know who or what or how, but the evidence is overwhelming that there is an intentionality and a design that underlies our existence. So as a scientist, my thinking was, if that's true, who or whatever put us here on Earth would have left something inside of every one of us that tells us we're part of a greater existence and tells us that we're a family and that we're not so different from one another. And if I could find that, if I could find that common denominator, that somehow maybe it would help us to become greater than the differences, that began a search. And I combined the science that I know of biology and history and ancient language, linguistics, genetics, with the new science of computers that were now on my desktop. And Daryl, I'll tell you, I remember the very first time as a scientist that I had the opportunity to see the human genome, a piece of human DNA coded on my computer screen. And all the CTAG, it all rolled down through the screen. And my brain looked at that, and I remember thinking, I said, I don't know what that says, but there's a code. There's a language. That DNA is a language. And whatever that language is, it's inside of me, and it's inside of everyone that looks at it. And some intelligent being placed it there a long time ago.
Using all the technology at his disposal, Mr. Braden then began searching for the message encoded in our DNA.
And this led to a research project using computers, the best science of today, and some of those ancient texts. And the bottom line is that what we discovered is every single ancient language, the letters of the language link to very precise numbers that have never changed. So whether we're talking about the Arabic language or the Hebrew language, or if we're talking about cuneiform and Sanskrit, what are called the ancient core or the ancient root languages, there's a mysterious number that's always been linked to those letters, and nobody knows where the numbers came from. That was interesting to me. So through a process that took many years, I came to understand that the numbers that represent the letter are also the numbers that represent the elements, what we call the elements on the periodic table of life and a physical reality as we know it. So in other words, it is if the ancients, they didn't know about the periodic table of elements the way we do today, but they knew about the numbers that were represented. And when we make the connections between the letters of the ancient alphabets, the numbers they represent, those numbers, if we look at them on the periodic table, they happen to be precisely the elements that make the DNA in our bodies. Now we have the ability to take the sequences of DNA in a cell and through those numbers link them to the letters in ancient alphabets. And lo and behold, the letters spell words and the words have meaning. And this has led to a book that's entitled The God Code. It was released in the year 2004. What we know is that there is a message, an intentional message within the DNA of all life. The message occurs in layers, and each layer has its own code that must be understood for that layer. And I'm still working on the deeper layers.
Greg Braden says the message hidden in the DNA of all living beings is that which spiritual masters have tried to convey to humanity through the ages. He now reveals what's written in the topmost layer of our genetic code.
The top layer is one that we understand very well right now. The top layer in the DNA of all life literally translates into the words God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. We don't know who put that message there. We don't know exactly why it's there. But I can tell you that all I did was I followed the instructions in a series of ancient texts, following those languages, and I married that with the science of today, and this is what we found. If a higher intelligence is responsible for our existence, and that intelligence created us, it makes perfect sense that that intelligence would have left something for us to understand who we are. And if they left it in a temple or a text that could be destroyed and disappear over time, it wouldn't make sense. It makes perfect sense that that higher intelligence would have left the message encoded into the creation itself. And as long as the creation exists, the message is intact.
Harvard University discovers message from God in our DNA code. Researchers at Harvard University announced today that they have found what appears to be a message from God written inside the human genome. In a little explored section of non-coding DNA, a team of top geneticists discovered a 22-word snippet of ancient Aramaic in which God confirms his existence and his role in creating life on Earth. The stunning finding represents nearly irrefutable evidence of God's existence and his role in creating the process of evolution of natural selection. The message was discovered when researchers noticed strange mathematical patterns appearing within a certain section of the genome. For heaven's sake! We knew the patterns weren't naturally occurring, explains Charles Watson, the lead scientist on the project. But we couldn't come up with any convincing explanation for them. On a whim, we started cross-referencing the patterns with language databases, he explains, and we were shocked to find that the patterns corresponded to ancient Aramaic. Stunned by its discovery, the team contacted language experts familiar with Aramaic, the language Jesus Christ spoke in daily life. Entirely decoded, the message reads, "Hello my children. This is Yahweh, the one true Lord. You have found creation's secret. Now share it peacefully with the world." Yahweh is the biblical name for the Judeo-Christian God. The findings will be published in the journal Nature next month, and are expected to provoke the biggest scientific controversy since Charles Darwin published his theory of natural selection in 1859. This doesn't mean that the theory of evolution is wrong, says Watson. It's just incomplete. It seems that in reality the Judeo-Christian God actually started the whole process. And instead of just telling us about natural selection, he left a hidden signature that we could find 200,000 years later when we invented the right technology. It makes total sense really. Before this discovery I was a committed atheist. Now I'm a devout Christian. This is exactly the kind of proof I needed to ease my doubts. In addition to its profound impact on science, the news is set to revolutionize the world of comparative religion. I think the message clearly indicates that God wants us to coexist peacefully with our fellow human beings, says Janice Taylor, a bishop in the Anglican Church. However, other Christian denominations have a different interpretation of the scientists' findings. Clearly this means that God is the one true God and that we should exterminate rival religions, says Frank Page, leader of the conservative Southern Baptist Convention. Now that we have truth on our side, I think it's time we start a new crusade.
If simple water molecules that form ice crystals exhibit magnificent structure, consider the design ingenuity behind large, complex molecules, such as DNA. DNA contains the blueprint for all life and is by far the densest information storage mechanism known in the universe. For example, the amount of information contained in a pinhead volume of DNA would fill a stack of books 500 times higher than from here to the moon. The program code and design of such an incredible system indicates a supremely intelligent designer.
The evidence to me that just cries out that there's a God is the study of DNA. DNA is a very powerful, massive information storage system. In fact, DNA that makes up our genes actually is like books of information that's read by a language system. It's absolutely phenomenal. And scientists know today that languages, a code, only come from an intelligence, and information only comes from information. Nobody's ever seen matter by itself give rise to a code. Nobody's ever seen matter by itself give rise to information. And as you look at DNA, it actually cries out, in the beginning, God created the universe.
We all begin as a single cell the size of a period at the end of a sentence. How does that cell know how to build a body with 100 trillion cells in it, thousands of different kinds, and each one of them is so complex, nanochemical machinery beyond our comprehension how it works, and encoded is the instruction manual. It's the manufacturer's manual how to build and operate every part of this incredible body made up of 100 trillion cells.
Furthermore, DNA is a three-dimensional molecule that is self-replicating. Each molecule is able to make an identical copy quickly and efficiently. The Lord has even programmed DNA to detect and correct replication errors. These sophisticated capabilities far exceed man's means.
God has created the DNA molecule in such a way that it is self-correcting. There are special proteins called enzymes that go up and down the DNA molecule looking for and making repairs on a minute-by-minute, second-by-second basis. God created us with a DNA code that actually has what we call editase or editorial-type enzymes. Just as an editor reads a newspaper or a book looking for mistakes, so God has created special enzymes that go up and down our DNA molecule, repairing the mistakes in ways that are unbelievably complex.
There are many examples in creation of things that demonstrate the biblical God. One would be in our very DNA. Our DNA has information in it. And there is a whole field of scientific study called information science, which studies how information originates, how it's transmitted, and so on. And one of the laws of information science says that information never originates by itself in matter, never spontaneously comes about. Anytime we trace the copying of information back to its source, it always comes back to a mind. And since we have creative information in DNA, that tells me that DNA comes from intelligence. It's not something that could possibly come about through millions of years of mutations and natural selection. That just won't work.
Yet even the DNA molecule is simple compared to cells. All life consists of cells, and each cell functions as a miniature city. When we consider that a human body consists of trillions of cells working together as one unit, we should be in humble awe of our Creator's intimate care and perfect wisdom.
What's up, everybody? You already know who it is. You got Wags My Tag here. And I just got bombarded with a story that is probably the most crazy thing that I've heard in a long time, and I run through the crazy stuff, so I'm going to drop you with this one. Let's see what you think about it. Harvard University discovers a message from God in our DNA code, in the double helix, right? And it says that 22 words were taken from a snippet of DNA. They had said it was in some repeating code, and it was in a section of non-coding DNA. And they discovered a 22-word segment of ancient Aramaic in which God confirms the creation of the earth, right, and life, right? This might be the craziest thing I've ever seen, guys. This is by Harvard and by their linguists. So this discovery was done at Harvard. Harvard is saying this, right? And Harvard linguists are interpreting what it says, all right? Is that crazy enough for you, right? All right, and I'm going to tell you what it says. This is a 22-word segment. Hello, my children. This is Yahweh, the one true Lord. You have found creation's secret. Now share it peacefully with the world. And that is mind-blowing, everybody. Harvard is they're the people saying, "Hello, my children, this is Yahweh." And I can't believe this. This is popped up on my feeds. This is this is a cutting edge story. And they say that they're going to release these findings in the Nature magazine, the Nature magazine, which is reputable. And they're going to actually publish that they found this. And with this published, this could be the greatest. They say it is going to be the most monumental debate since Charles Darwin defined natural selection. And this could be crazy, guys. If this is scientifically refutable that this is a message in Aramaic, then I mean, are people who believe in science, the people who are atheists, that are firm believers in only science and the abundance that has brought us, they're gonna have to look at this and say, oh well, that's science, biology, and our biology and our history together. They just put together the pieces. But I just can't believe that Harvard is saying something along these lines. I'm gonna have the link for this in the description. You can read it for yourself and decipher what you think of it. But this is going to be a real wait-and-see attitude to see what's published, because this is the mind-blowing story that we've all been waiting for. So if you like this video, I'm going to keep up with it, see what's going on, better study into it, because this seems kind of fishy. But if it's real, it's Harvard. So rate, comment, subscribe, get at it. Peace, guys.
Why? You were not a believer early in your life. Why?
It was the way I was raised. I was raised in this remarkable environment by a drama professor father and a playwright mother, surrounded by theater, music, the arts. They were doing the 60s thing, except it wasn't quite the 60s yet. And I was exposed to all kinds of fascinating ways to learn about life and the world and ideas. But faith was not really on the list of things that were talked about. It wasn't that faith was put down or considered inappropriate for other people. It just didn't sort of enter the conversation in my childhood.
Did it exist in your mind as a question?
Oh, I had glimmers of something, some longing outside of myself, some sense that maybe there was a God up there that I might be able to reach out to.
What brought you as an adult then to faith?
Well, first, as an adult, I walked very far away from faith. I went from being sort of vaguely interested, but not really, to becoming an atheist. As a scientist studying physical chemistry, quantum mechanics, I became convinced that everything about the universe could be described by equations.
So what changed that for you?
Well, I changed my life plan from physical science to medicine. And when I went to medical school, the ideas about death and dying, which had been rather hypothetical, became very real. You can't be in that environment, sitting at the bedside of people who are facing the end of their lives without having it affect you.
Did you set out to find God or to find that there was no God?
I set out to prove that my atheist position was correct. I set out to try to find out what really were the rigorous arguments that I assumed were there that would rule out any possibility of God for a thinking person.
You must have found many of them.
I found some. Many of them were ones I had cooked up in my own mind. But the harder I looked at them, the flimsier they were. All of us human beings have a sense that there is such a thing as right and there's such a thing as wrong. What a curious thing. Where does that come from? If you were looking for evidence of a God who cares about human beings, not just a God who started the universe in motion and then wandered off somewhere else, wouldn't this be an interesting place to find him? Basically as something written within our hearts, universally in humankind, making us different from other species, and calling us to be good and holy, pointing us as a signpost, if you will, towards something outside ourselves that is much more good and much more holy than we can imagine.
Did you have at some point a born-again experience?
When people talked to me about born again, I didn't know what they were really referring to when I was growing up. But yes, I did have a moment where I became a believer. I had struggled for 2 years with this debate within myself, gradually coming to the conclusion that belief in God was the most plausible of the choices, but that it couldn't be proved. And after many months of struggling with whether to make that leap, on a beautiful fall day, hiking in the Northwest with my mind a little more clear than usual because there were not the usual distractions, I felt I could no longer resist. And I became a believer that day in the sunshine and the shadow of the Cascade Mountains.